One world, one people, one tribe, one tribe. What I know, what I know, we are one. What I know, what I know, no, 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 we are one.
It all starts with the people. One people, we stand all together, one voice saying yes we can. Each one, reach one till we pull ourselves up, cause we all one fam. From the rest to the block, to the Perry, to the rock, we connect that love. Cause the people with power feel the power of the people when we stand as one.
I got you stuck off the realness. We be indigenous, you heard of us. Max Heaven, the murderer, spreading the love with the water and earth. And the stand against hate, gotta know what the purpose is. We rise, the climate is changing, the signs of the times. It's time to start praying. Pray for the world and community. Prayers are more powerful when we're in unity.
What I know, we are one. What I know, what I know, no, 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 we are one.
Woke up today, hungry for a change, new path to take. Can't stay the same, it's been too long. Pointing out who's right or wrong, can you hear me out? All we need is a little bit of love. Take time to heal and it starts with us. Hand in hand, I put my trust in one world, reunite, it's a must. Hold on to hope, we can overload. We can break the code with a single note. Sing out for the world to hear that our time is now, no more for tears. I looked into my son's eyes, a new day in a new light. Lift the veil and dwell so peaceful. Come together, one world, one people.
What I know, we are one. What I know, what I know, no, 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 we are one. 'Cause who you are is who I am. We all bleed the same blood, yeah. Hey. One world. We all bleed the same blood, yeah.
We got beautiful differences, let me give you a peek. Over 500 tribes, but we all unique. And if we could not compete to eat, nothing could beat us. Jealousy is more dangerous than diabetes. See this unity? Imagine what it looked like. You would think we would do whatever it took, right? I would do anything for this good life. We could do anything if we unite. Come on.
Young native, you are my savior. So you pray for our inspiration. From the block to your reservation. Any color, all my relations. From the basement, worldwide invasion. Every day we're painting our faces. Fighting back but learning our language. Dancing our dances, saying our prayers.
What I know, we are one. What I know, what I know, no, 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 we are one. We only got one world. We only got one world. We only got one world. Yeah. All we got is one voice, one choice, one earth, one love, one birth, one life to live. One life to live, yeah.
One people, we stand all together, one voice saying yes we can. Each one, reach one till we pull ourselves up, cause we all one fam. From the rest to the block, to the Perry, to the rock, we connect that love. Cause the people with power feel the power of the people when we stand as one.
What I know, what I know, we are one. What I know, what I know, no, 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 we are one. What I know, no, 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 we are one.
So welcome, and we're glad that you can join us today. Before we get started, we need to review some information about participation disclosures. So whenever you're ready, Emily.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Emily Field, and I'm an evaluation specialist here at USET. Just some quick participation tips. We're building a community. Please make use of the staff. Go ahead, or not the staff, the chat. Go ahead and share your name, your tribal nation affiliation, if any, your intertribal organization affiliation in the chat. That would be great. Everyone's going to be muted because there's so many of us until the participant reflections portions towards the end of the hour. And during that segment, you can use your raise my hand feature, and the host will unmute you to offer you, so you can offer reflection. If you don't want to speak, you can also just input your thoughts, questions into the chat. And as soon as the session ends, you'll be sent over to an evaluation. And then also, by the end of the week, you'll receive a link to the recording and presentations from this week. Next slide. Okay, these are disclosures. This activity is jointly provided by the United South and Eastern Tribes and Cardia Services. We are offering continuing education, medical and nursing credits. And next month, we will start offering continuing social work credits. You do have to fill out the evaluation that you'll be prompted to as soon as this call ends. And you have to attend the entire hour to get the CE credits, and they will be emailed to you. If you have any questions, you can contact Kayla Natale directly, or you can contact any one of the USET staff and we can pass along your request.
Matakue Oyase. Welcome, all my relations. Welcome to today's monthly session of Reclaiming Native Psychological Brilliance. Today's session is on nurturing psychological brilliance. On behalf of USET and our partners, we would like you to, we're glad you joined today. If you would look at this map, we have shown that you are on Indigenous land. We would like to recognize that. So just acknowledge, you can go ahead and look at the website, or you can text this number and you can see where you're, where you're located. Next slide. And an Indigenous representation of the community we are building. So we have everybody that is on the call today. They are shown on this map. So you're all here. We have Alaska, Hawaii, all across the United States, Canada, and of course, our USET tribal nation areas. Next slide. So I would like to introduce today's session with Holly Echohawk. She is a citizen of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma. She is the Senior Behavioral Health Advisor for Reclaiming Native Psychological Brilliance series. And without further ado, go ahead, Holly. You are Ellen.
Hello, everybody. I'm Holly Echohawk. Super happy to be here today. I hope I can notice, Bernice, when you were talking, you were kind of cutting in and out. So I'm hoping that you all can hear me very clearly. My role today is just to introduce the session. And I think the perfect way to introduce the session today is to start with this statement. Native people are brilliant. We're born brilliant. It's in our DNA, and that brilliance lives in every cell in our body. Indigenous youth are exceptionally brilliant. I know it. You all probably know it. We see it every day. And I wanted to mention that this series is very intentional. It's intentional. The intentionalness of this series was developed with the overarching theme of reclaiming Native psychological brilliance. And note that we use the word reclaiming. Reclaiming implies that it's always been there. It's there today. So welcome to the series. And today we're focusing on Native youth. And as adults and elders and role models and mentors, we have a responsibility to nurture the future of Native young people and to help them see what they are. And that is innate intelligence and their role as critical community assets. We need to help them see their value despite racism, despite discrimination, and what may feel to them at times as unrelenting mainstream misunderstanding of who they are and what they contribute to the world. So today, we're going to listen to the voices of and the perspective of Native youth advocates and Native young adults. So we hope you enjoyed the session today, and we're going to go on to the next slide. So I want to introduce two wonderful people from Indigenous education, Melvin, and we'll start with Melvin.
Bonjour, good morning here in Albuquerque. My name is Melvin Manette Barajas. I am the CEO for Indigenous Education, Inc., which is the home of the Cobell Scholarship. Just real quick and real short, the Cobell Scholarship was started because of the brilliance of Eloise Cobell, but also the brilliance of all of our applicants and the brilliance we know that exists in Indian country. We did not want to be just the standard scholarship, the standard entitlement scholarships. So what we look for are, we look for brilliance. We look for those students who are academically strong, but also highly engaged in their communities and either are leaders or have leadership potential, and can articulate it in our very lengthy application, but it's a highly competitive application. And we have funded a little over, the numbers here are a little bit off. We're actually at 4,200 scholars now. And we have a summer fellowship program. We've funded 26 brilliant researchers in Indian country, researching everything that some of their applications, I don't even understand what it is they're doing. They're so brilliant. That's who we are. That's what we do in a nutshell. Please visit our website. And I'm going to let Milani jump in because she's got the real brilliance.
Thanks, Melvin. We're so thrilled to have you with us today, and that's very impressive. Over 4,200 students, Indigenous students you've supported. So kudos to all that. Milani, my friend.
Hi, G'day, Gids, Marishi Gohaide Ekateshwish Heads. My name is Milani Fox. I'm an enrolled member of the 3 affiliated tribes. I'm Mandan and Hidatsa, born and raised on the res. I'm here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I've been working with Indigenous Education, Inc. since day one. So it's really special to be here with Melvin and all of our audience. I'm gonna give you a little overview on our campaign, Indigenous, Genius Ideas, Indigenous Minds. This brilliant campaign came out of a typo. We accidentally misspelled Indigenous, and Melvin saw it. Melvin's like, lock that in the vault. We're gonna use that. And so what special way but to provide a platform and to highlight Indigenous youth and Indigenous professionals on a digital platform for which we use social media to talk about everything indigenous. We really realized that there was a need for positive representation within the social media sphere. I was just, I'm sure like everyone else was really overwhelmed with all the, I guess, media that was coming out around like campaigns such as like No Dapple. And I was like, okay, so the public is seeing these people in this lens that is not ours. So we're going to provide a lens that is ours and provide our stories of these leaders, activists, youth, professionals, and every musicians who are doing really amazing things within Indian country. And so that's kind of where Indigenous came from. We do utilize the Cobell Scholarship social media to house all of our content. We do have around 2 large campaigns a year to celebrate individuals within Indian country and to also celebrate Cobell scholars. This past, or I guess late 2021, we had a partnership with the National Indian Education Association, where we created a video series surrounding the youth from all the way from elementary to PhD professionals. And so 2 of them are here today, which are going to talk, and I'm so excited for them to be here, and I'm sure they're going to be introduced later on. But if you're interested in seeing what Indigenous is all about, we have a YouTube series, which is on the Indigenous Education Inc. YouTube page. The link is available here that goes directly to our channel, but we have playlists on everything Indigenous. And you can also see our past campaigns on our Facebook and Instagram pages. And if you know somebody, or even the people who are present today who is like, hey, that's me, I would love to feature you. I would love to do a highlight on you and your work. So definitely I'll put my email within the chat, and let's collaborate. Thank you so much, Holly, for creating this space today. I really appreciate the opportunity to highlight Indigenous.
Thank you so much, Milani and Melvin, for joining us today. And what an example of Native brilliance. Only Native people would take a typo and turn it into Indigenous. Fabulous. And thanks for sharing the link as well. So with that wonderful overview, it's my great pleasure to introduce my new friend, Zoe Harris. And Zoe is a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. And she's currently a PhD student, I'm so proud, at the University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health. And Zoe is going to share a little bit about herself and what inspired her to move forward and where she's at in her wonderful journey. Zoe?
Winikisak, Natasui Zoe Harris, Kawapan Kimiwet, Nutamas Masipiat, Ka Natai Chicagoet. Good morning, everyone. My name is Zoe Harris. As Holly said, I'm a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. That's where my ancestors are. But I'm currently on the land of the Three Fire Miami people, so the Ojibwe, Adawa, and Potawatomi here in Chicago. And I'm really excited to be here.
So, one of the questions I have for you, Zoe, is you've been on such an incredible journey from Cape Cod, being raised in Massachusetts, to where you're at now, and you've had a lot of achievements. So what kind of inspired you to move forward? I mean, what was your motivations to move forward on this educational path that you're on?
Yeah, I feel like I could probably give a very long answer and a very short answer, so I'll try and find a happy medium right now. But so I grew up on Cape Cod. I was lucky enough to live on my ancestral homelands. I didn't grow up in Mashpee. I grew up in the next town over with my very loving parents and my younger sister, Alyssa, and a few various cats and dogs throughout my lifetime. And it was a really interesting kind of path for me, because even though I was on my tribal land, it has been absolutely taken over by non-Indigenous people. So even though, again, I was the next town over, not only was I one of the few Native people, but I was also one of the few people of color, period. So in addition to being a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, I identify as Afro-Indigenous. So my father, who is also Mashpee, his father's from Selma, Alabama. So we have roots in, in enslavement in America. My mother is mixed as well. So she's half white, but she's also Jamaican. So I'm also a citizen of Jamaica. So I just have all of these things that I'm trying to balance, just being a person in this world. And at the same time, I'm in a predominantly white school. And I think that I can pinpoint multiple moments in my life where people advocated for me when I didn't yet have the language to talk about the things that were important to me. And I think about those times when I was younger, I think about those times now, and just because I don't have the language to talk about what is happening to me doesn't mean that I don't understand it. And that's kind of what I have thought about over time. So actually this weekend in particular, one of my best friends from high school got married, and I had 2 high school teachers that were at this wedding. And, you know, we were reflecting on that time that we had spent together. And even though I don't think in that moment, when I was in high school, I knew how they were going to propel me to this moment that I am now. But again, it's really those people that took the time to not even just help me with my education, but to help me as a human being, and really tried to help me understand those moments. I think about all the time, some of the most influential people for me, I've just kind of like met just because. So one person that comes to mind is Ellen Cushman, who is a citizen of the of the Cherokee Nation. She works at Northeastern, which is my alma mater for both my bachelor's as well as my master's of public health. And I just happened to go to an event that they were hosting one day. I saw the event that day and I was like, okay, I'll just go and show up and see what happens. I just happened to sit next to Ellen, and she has since written me several letters of recommendation. She helped me learn about Indigenous methodology and pedagogy and how to integrate it into a very Western viewpoint of academia, has really helped me with my master's thesis. And again, just really just supports me as a human being. So I think, and even in this moment now, it's really just taking those leaps and kind of what you've talked about, just Native people just kind of knowing. Sometimes it's hard to make those really big life decisions, but just saying, you know what, this is a decision that I'm making, whether I fail and, you know, this is a huge mistake, that's fine, you know, at least I try, but, you know, sometimes really amazing things can come out of it. And that's kind of how I've gotten to the space where I'm at now.
That's fantastic. And I think you're kind of a perfect example of sometimes when you're young and Native and like you said, maybe don't have quite the language yet to express what you're feeling, or that so many Native young people get misunderstood. And the way that they communicate is different than maybe public school education teachers understand. So they get misunderstood and get viewed sometimes as less intelligent, when in fact, they're probably the smartest cookie in the room. They're just expressing themselves differently. So one other question for you, Zoe. If you or any of your close friends have had different kinds of life struggles, but yet were able to move beyond that, they went through it and came out on the other side, and we're still on their 2 feet and still move forward. In that kind of example, what do you think helped them, continue to move forward?
Yeah. So you had actually sent me these questions beforehand. Now that I'm sitting here, I think I'm going to share a different story. So my younger sister, who I mentioned, her name is Alyssa. If you didn't notice, her name starts with an A, mine starts with a Z, A to Z. My parents were very clever. But so when I was in 4th grade, 3rd through 4th grade, really, my younger sister was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And she had seizures, and it was really, luckily it was benign, so that means that she did not have cancer, but it was definitely something that was affecting her in her life. So she got the surgery, and during surgery, she ended up having a stroke. So when they took out the tumor, they cut off the blood supply to the entire right side of her body. And that's a lot for anybody. That's a lot as the individual. It's a lot as a parent. But I think that this in particular was just like a really shining moment for my family, but also for my community. as important as the medicine was to it, our tribal community, like specifically our chief, really took time to hold our family and to make sure that we had those spiritual and cultural connections to come together. Whether it was, you know, family friends taking me after school because my parents were going to and from Boston to take care of my parents at the time. My dad like taught my sister, like he would go to the beach with my sister every single day to practice diving with her, because that was the best way for her to learn how to use her body again in a very like safe environment. And thinking about like, and even though that was such a huge moment, it was really just only a single moment in time for her, for my family, for me. And like looking at her now, she is an amazing language champion in our community. She was one of the first people to finish the language project's high school curriculum. She has done some amazing work with the community, and like her art is beautiful. She does this amazing weaving for the community. And I really think that it's, you know, because we have had those examples throughout our life of people being there when we really needed them to be there. And again, just tying it back to where I am now, even in those really like hard moments, it sounds very cliche, but like, you know, it's, you're going to get out of it eventually. But sometimes you just kind of need that like extra piece to kind of get you through it, because it can be hard to see the other side of it sometimes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. And you remind me that, and I think when we were talking earlier, which I so enjoyed conversations with you, Zoe, is I don't know of any Native person, any Indigenous person who hasn't had some kind of life struggle. But what you described is, you know, even in earth-shaking events that happen, the thing that struck me about what you said is that your community gathered around you, that you were not alone. And I think that Native people do that, whether it's through bringing food, helping with transportation, ceremony, whatever it is. The hidden thing in that is not only that you're not alone, is that I believe that Native people, it's almost like osmosis. They take some of that trauma and emotional pain at times off of you or people like you and absorb it into themselves, so that you're not, you as an example, are not overwhelmed. That, and I really believe that happens, that we as Native people and Native communities and Native family members, we have a way of kind of absorbing that emotional overload on individuals, and helps. And I think that is a huge help. So thank you so much, Zoe. That was fantastic information and personal. Thanks for sharing your personal story. And so before we move on to our next wonderful young person, is there any last thing you want to share with the audience that's out there listening to you? Any words of advice for them?
Yeah, I guess it would really just be to hold space for people. I think I forget my privilege sometimes, being a young person who is able to be a citizen of a federally recognized tribe and, you know, get the, although they definitely don't fulfill it, the benefits that come with being part of a federally recognized tribe. And especially as I've really become more of like an urban Indian, I really identify with that experience now. Seeing people on all edges of the spectrum coming into their own indigeneity, whether it's people, you know, who may have been adopted out because of ICWA, so they know that they're Native, but they don't have that cultural connection, or people who, you know, might be descendants and they grew up on the reservation and they grew up around all these people, but because of the white blood quantum, whatever standards you have, they're not a card-carrying Indian. And really just reminding people that just because you're not being put into this tiny little box that the government has said has defined you as Native doesn't mean that you're not Native. Yeah, I think that's where I'll end it.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Thank you, Zoe. You really honor us by being here with us today. Um,
Thanks again for having me.
So we're going to move next to my other new friend, Johnny Buck. There he is. Fabulous picture, Johnny. John, and I'll let Johnny introduce himself.
Ja, chikuk mas tuken klaken when I'm on my naswa nexalam kwaskwai na swa yachai sa wow nasipa. Good morning, good relatives. It's great to see you all. Beautiful faces and names here. My name is Johnny Buck. I'm currently residing in the Coast Salish territory here in Seattle, Washington. I'm originally from a small village in South Central Washington State. My father's side is Wanapum. It's a non-federally recognized tribe. A traditionalist tribe. It's my elders I grew up with were the last group of Native people living in traditional homes and off of the land up until the 1950s. So my grandparents' generation never went to Western school or boarding school or anything like that. My father's generation, but he just passed this past week. But he was the first to graduate through a K-12 with a high school diploma. So I was raised to live off of the land, gather, fishing for all the native fisheries here on the Columbia River, especially salmon, and gathering foods and hunting. And it's a very super remote area. There are basically no healthcare facilities within an hour or anything like that. So grew up with ceremony and all that stuff. So yeah, I guess that's a short introduction. I hope that's helpful for you all.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm so impressed with Johnny about is just his background in the Columbia River is which is the border between Washington State and Oregon. Is a very powerful native power is on that river and the tribes that live on that river. And so for your background to be part of one of those tribes, Johnny, is just really deep. So, so thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you kind of a similar question that I asked Zoe is, because you've had some great successes, and you also were one of the Indigenous students. But I'm wondering what inspired you? I mean, what were those key? Were there some key inspirational moments in your younger life and to where you are today that kept you moving forward?
Yeah, so I graduated high school and went into college, and I was the first to ever even attempt to go to college from my village. And currently I'm the only one that has an undergraduate degree. And what inspired that pathway was I failed miserably my first shot, or fantastically, however I want to look at it, out of community college. Just because I didn't know what was happening. It was like a very scary and fearful thing to be like, I don't even know like what the admissions office is. I was accepted and I didn't know how to navigate the whole system. So it was very difficult and didn't have any family support. But my elders received me graciously, and especially my brilliant father. And we were receiving a number of like human remains, and there was this whole project with NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Repatriation Act. So we're going to receive tens of thousands of funerary objects and all of that, and I was going to work with my elders to repatriate them back into the ground. So that gave me a lot of grounding, and I became an archaeological tech and began protecting and preserving the integrity of the history of our culture and everything that's important to us and our ancestors' villages. but I found myself in a 1 by 1 meter pit, and this was a rich archaeological site that we were looking. It was rich in geologic history, so everything was in place. There was a strata from tens of thousands of years, all intact. And it took us a couple of months to dig very meticulously, 1 centimeter at a time. And from morning, right, it was sunrise. As a scientist, it was like we have to wait for the correct amount of light before we can begin. And then we'll end when we don't have enough light. So that was my job for a couple of months, and it was very meditating. I got to reflect on a lot of things, especially looking at the history of the deposits, the deposition, the different climates, the different artifacts that I was finding, the multiple uses of a same area. And I would go into my pit, my hole, come up in the evening, but there was nothing there except a large hydroelectric dam that we were digging above. So that's what I would see. So with like all of this history being built up in me and me reflecting, I'm like, there's so much more for me. I need to find my pathway. I need to find my space. There's more I want and more I need to fulfill like what's inside of me. And I said I need to go to college. So that was a big inspirational moment for me. And kind of fast forward after that project, I was on the Hanford Nuclear Reservation doing some remediation work. And this is my ancestral homeland too. And we put these suits on to do a survey of the land, of the document the artifacts that were on the land that were going to be disturbed. And it was eye-opening to me that like the most contaminated place in the Western Hemisphere, all of these scientists, physicists and engineers that were trying to figure out what to do with this toxic waste, this nuclear waste, this plutonium waste, effluent waste, and all they were doing was just burying it with more earth, but it was still seeping. I'm like, that doesn't take all of these amazing scientists. I'm like, I could come up with better ideas on how to figure that out. So I, anyways, wanted to become a PhD in environmental engineering.
And well on your way. But before we go on, let me just take a moment and express how sorry I am for your loss. And I'm sure that everybody listening is sending you good thoughts as well for that. Losing a parent is profound, and I've had that experience. So all my sympathies to you and your family. And thanks for sharing that story about failing miserably. That's super important. I too failed miserably. When I first started college, I've never seen buildings. I've never seen a map of a campus. I couldn't read the map to find where I was supposed to go. So I failed miserably the first semester in college because it was just too abrupt of a change from country, native to being in a university setting. But then I figured it out and did well, but as you have. But I really relate to that. And I think there's a lot to say in that, Johnny, about picking yourself up after you fail and being able to kind of almost chuckle about it. So I think that's really insightful what you shared about failing and yet moving on. And then the second thing that I wanted to thank you for is your involvement with repatriation. And I think there's nothing more sacred than repatriation. and for you to have those insights while you were in a pit is incredibly powerful image. So thank you for sharing that. And then I wondered if you could share the story you told before about your life direction and the shooting an arrow.
Yeah,
Do you
absolutely,
remember that
Holly.
story about, you were talking about an analogy of how with your life direction, it was like shooting an arrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a powerful analogy, and I still think about it. And my accuracy was right. So undergraduate is in Native Environmental Science and Engineering. The very ambitious and rigorous internship every summer, including Harvard and NASA. But along the way, I found things out about myself. Uh, I was aiming to become a PhD in environmental engineering. I wanted to help that space, right? But I just currently applied in January deadline to the #2 school in the nation for human-centered design engineering. And that's more accurate and reflective of like who I am and what I want to do. And that's going to equip me with the tools to achieve those things that I want to do in my communities on a personal level, like on a micro scale, but also on a macro. And this was further, say, just think about the analogy of like shooting somewhere. Like you just kind of aim towards it and you're kind of accurate. But once you know how to shoot that bow and arrow, you can get very precise, right? And really hit the bullseye. And I think that's more where I'm leaning towards, more where I'm at in life now. During the COVID, it was a very difficult time, and I was working basically for Native communities, kind of on this high-level position, working on environmental, like consultant, but also mitigating the health impacts of developments for some of these communities, and especially Native communities. So at a high level, I understood like how many people we were losing in our Native communities along the river, and it was difficult. Oh my gosh, it was difficult. But I ran into um, a person, Dr. Ollie Thomas, who's a Black hospitalist at St. Joe's in Tacoma, Washington. And he's like, hey, I want to meet you. I understand you have experience with organization and founding organizations. Because in my undergrad, I founded a national nonprofit organization called the Native Youth Leadership Alliance, which was a difficult task and with no experience, especially. But I go, yeah. He's like, you want to help me found an organization to increase the number of healthcare professionals for BIPOC communities? And I was like, well, I have the capacity. I'm like, like how difficult this undertaking is going to be. He's like, yeah, that's why I need your help. But anyways, that helped me because I found like I love deep thinking. I love designing complex systems. I'm a systems thinker. I'm a visionary, and I'm just like, hey, like that makes a lot of sense because there's books written on my family, drummers and dreamers, prophets of the Columbia River, etc. And there are a lot of like medicine people, and I go to the tops of like mountains like throughout their lives and like seek knowledge. Like, oh, so I have it's no coincidence that I I I'm good at like thinking about like these things and building relationships, um, and that's precisely like who I am. Like that's precisely who my ancestors and my elders were. That's what I'm good at. I'm good at being in service. to people. I'm good at like communicating, right? I'm okay like at storytelling, not like the orators of like my elders and ancestors, but with practice I might get there, and it's within inside of me. But more than anything, I think I understand like what makes me happy, what brings me joy, and it is this work, and it is in this pathway. It is like precisely in these pathways. I don't know what it's going to bring me, but I could assume like the people that and the places that I'm going to experience are going to continue to contribute to uh, this happiness, this joy, this growth, this transformation. Because when I wasn't accurate, when I wasn't even shooting an arrow and I was kind of just like blowing in the wind, I found myself in places that were more extractive to my energy, that were not bringing me joy and happiness. So I hope that makes sense. Um, Maybe I've veered off on that analogy a little
Mhm.
bit, Holly, but that's what I have today.
That makes total sense. And you have just proven, both Zoe and you have proven my point, is that brilliance is in our DNA. And you made that point really wonderfully. And I also really appreciate what you said about deep thinking. I've had some conversations lately with people in my tribe, and one of the questions were, where's our deep thinkers? You know, we used to always have deep thinkers. And that's when you would see men, and in some tribes, women, sitting together in deep thought. And they are thinking of not just their immediacy, but the future. So I love that conversation you shared with us about deep thinking. And the last thing I want to just note is happiness. How important it is to find your happiness, find what is nourishing you intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, and for you to talk about, you know, and you can feel it, and we can feel it from you on what makes you happy and how important that is for your direction. So thank you so much. Just one last quick question before we transition. Do you have anything you want to share with the audience on how they can be of support to young people, young Native Indigenous people?
Yeah, I mean, we experience difficult times all the time. Some of the things that bring me some solace and grounding, I'll always have like a glass of water by me. I'll have like a candle lit. It's like water and fire, right? And I also have like earth with a plant, and you know, just some of the smudge and medicines, and that brings me a lot of grounding. But I also have been very intentional about like somatic practice, and understand it to be in an indigenous practice. So breathing. So I take deep breaths, and I share these practices with I'm a certified professional coach, so some of the young organizers I'm coaching, I share some of these breathing practices with them, and they're like, hey, can you give me more of that? I want to learn more like about that, because so if we could just all connect with one breath, a deep inhale and a slow exhale. And on that deep inhale, let's breathe in that brilliance that we all manifest here. And let's exhale some of the energy that isn't going to serve us for the rest of the day. Um, so we can begin now. Yeah, thank you, Holly.
Thank you. Thank you, Johnny. I always say too, Johnny Buck's got one of the coolest names in town. Thank you for sharing all of that. Well, we're going to transition now to Libya Davis, who's going to do some facilitated reflection on what we've heard, and then we'll end with summary remarks, and then we have a wonderful video that we'll close with. So I hope everyone can stay to the top of the hour. Livia?
Thank you, Holly, and thank you, Johnny, and thank you, Zoe. That was so inspiring. Thank you. We are going to take a couple of minutes to have a little bit of interaction around what you heard. But before we go there, I just want to make sure you know who is in front of you. So I am Olivia Davis. I live in Maine now, but I'm an immigrant to this country, came over when I was 18. And I'm the Chief Learning Officer at C4 Innovations and part of this team. And I'm just so honored to be here and to be facilitating with you. So thank you for everything you shared. If you can look at the slide that's on there today, you can see, or on there right now, you can see that there are two questions. And we are hoping that you will start putting some of your reflections in the chat box. And then we're also hoping that a couple of you might be able to share. So if you'd like to share, you could raise your hand virtually, and we will see if we can't get a couple of people to talk during this session. So the two questions are, what did Zoe and Johnny share about reclaiming and nurturing brilliance that you might use in your work? And what hope does Zoe and Johnny have for you as the audience? What did you hear them sharing? There was a lot of examples of things that were important that helped on their journeys that they shared with us. So please take some time and reflect on those questions. And I hope to see some traffic in the chat box. So a couple of examples I heard from Zoe was that she had examples in her life of people really being there, to remind her of her brilliance. It was one of the things I heard from Zoe. And I heard one of the things I heard from Johnny was the connection to his ancestors in his work, that he started to really opened up something for him. All right, we're starting to see some folks in the chat box. This is great. Yes, Michelle, you're right. Michelle Sauve, the importance of community support, right? The community connections. And the reason why we want you to reflect on this is, how to bring some of this to your work. And reclaiming, becoming more visible. Yes. In April, I think your comment about the not having enough blood quantum to qualify for enrollment, that is such an important point that Zoe brought up. Just thinking about the inner brilliance, that your brilliance is not just westernized thinking. Yes. And yes, to reconnection to your ancestor and the spiritual help. And Joanne Morris, you're saying, I love Zoe's point about young people sometimes not having the exact words or vocabulary, what's going on with them. I think that's so true. As an immigrant, I know, so I certainly didn't always have the right word. So really understanding young people and how to connect with them. Community support, yes. I'm wondering if anyone wants to share something. Let's see if there's a hand up. I'm sorry if I have to scroll down to make sure if anybody has a hand up. Yeah, the point, Callie, you're making about bringing out the deep thinkers in our community. Yes, we heard both Holly and Johnny talk about that, giving them the space, creating that space. What might that look like? And Patrick Danforth, you're saying if you feel like it begins with education and stopping culture shaming and emotional abuse within our communities. Yes, re-educating ourselves about our values, traditions, and cultural principles. There's a lot of really good reflections here, and I'm wondering if you can put a little bit about what hope does Zoe and Johnny have for you as the audience? What did you hear? Tamika, I see your comment about loving that Johnny was not accepting the method in which toxic waste is being handled and acknowledging that he can use his brilliance to help care for Mother Earth. Yes. And Shirin, I hope I say your name right, both elucidated the importance of being intentional, passionate, and empowering to ourselves and for others to strive forward. Yes. Julie, you heard not letting dominant culture define personal brilliance. Yes. But moving past not having the skills initially to navigate higher learning. Yes, they provide role models of strength. And Johnny gave me hope that I can go back to college to get my master's. This is coming in from Sky. Just so many good things. And this series really is about, reclaiming that. And it's so nice to see so many good examples here. I have one hand, two hands. Malaya, would you like to say something? I think we have time for comment. Yeah.
Yeah, I can share real quick. I just really appreciated what Johnny talked about around going to college. I think it's so easy to kind of let college disconnect you from your people and from, the reality of what the problems are and the things we care about, especially when sometimes it can feel like there's not really a right place to go back to after you've been through that kind of experience. And so I appreciate what he talked about, not losing touch with his people and not losing touch with the original thoughts that kind of inspired him to go to college, and kind of using college as like, the US education system is a colonial system, but he took the colonial tool and used it for his purposes and really saw in both worlds that way. So I appreciated, his talking about that.
Yeah, talk about brilliance. Talk about brilliance, right? Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much. And I also loved the idea of failing fantastically. I think I'm going to borrow that frame rather than failing miserably. I really love that because so many times, it's taking that step and having the support of folks to talk to when you take that step and maybe not knowing exactly what's going to happen. So, well, thank you. We are going to keep all of these and I will turn it back over to you, Holly. I just want to thank you again. Great chat box. Thank you so much. And thank you to Johnny and Zoe.
So now we're just going to move just for a couple of minutes, some summary remarks from Ken Craybill and then myself, and we'll transition to the last video, which I think you all will really enjoy, and another example of Native young adult brilliance. So Ken, you want to start?
Thank you, Holly. Thank you all. I am just sitting here really gobsmacked, as they might say in Australia. But I want to just say two things. One is, in behavioral health, we talk a lot about being strength-based, but I'm beginning to think, I want to think about and talk more about being brilliance-focused. It just seems to be a larger kind of extrapolation of the meaning of that word. And if anybody wants to join the movement with me, happy to bring you along. The second thing I think about in listening to Zoe and to Johnny is that, you know, we're all born as a seed of brilliance, if you will. And yet, if I gave each of you a seed and said, here, make it grow, it wouldn't actually be very successful unless we had people in our lives who created the conditions for which we are able to grow. And I heard that come through so loudly with both of you. Zoe, I know I heard words like you were loved well, people advocated for you, they believed in you, they inspired you, they held you in hard times. And all of those themes, which others of you have mentioned too, just really came through strongly to me, that we are seeds of brilliance, and yet we can't become brilliant by ourselves, with ourselves. We need that communal, that family to help us do that. Our ancestors, and well, I think it was you opened, Johnny, by saying, I think you used the term good, hello, good relatives, which I just was a beautiful statement, I thought. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Ken. I really like brilliance focused. I think that is a really insightful movement that we need to all kind of latch onto. I like that a lot. And I guess my summary of what I hear is, you know, it's sort of my mantra, and I think it's probably everybody on this call's mantra now, and that is to assume brilliance. When you have a Native person in your classroom, or that is in your health center, or wherever, and no matter what they look like, no matter what condition their condition is in, assume brilliance. And lucky, I always say, lucky us to be able to see and touch and help Native people, because we're so fortunate to be in their presence, to be in their space. The last point I want to make is, I think it's really important, and probably not, in my opinion, not talked about enough, and that is ways to nurture our cells. You know, I'm always saying DNA is in us, and it's in every cell in our body. But to nurture our cells plural, and our self, I think that Johnny's focus on breathing and that physical self part of what needs to be nurtured, because every time we do that, a deep breathing exercise, it is, in my opinion, it's touching every cell in our body. So we're nurturing the DNA cells of our brilliance by taking care of ourselves physically, and that includes deep breathing. So thank you, Zoe and Johnny, for that wonderful insight that you've given us. Look what you've inspired. So now we're going to transition to that last video, which is 2 minutes long. And then we'll close. We have one closing slide after this.
Darling, you were crafted from the finest things that this earth has to offer. The tan of your skin has surfaced from the purest grains of soil that hold your feet. Your hair falls down your back as if water was tumbling down rock, but then settles. Darling, your fingers are flowers that are softer than any pain that tries to take hold of you. Your hands are power, and your limbs are rooted to your soul. They aren't meant to fall by your sides, they're meant to reach higher than any tree in sight. Darling, stand proud. Your head might be home to demons, but your heart is home to so much more. Find your heart, and just like the beat of a drum, let it make sound, because our ancestors didn't make drums to be silent. I know how hard it can be to feel like you are walking in darkness. But darling, there is only so much darkness until there is sun. And even when there is no sun, there is moon. So let that remind you that you are never walking alone in darkness. Our ancestors see you. And just like the air that we breathe, even when coldness hurts our lungs, we need you. Because you are life. Darling, you matter.
That was Tanshe Redverse, and her brother and her founded the WeMatterCampaign.org, or in First Nations in Canada, it's a cell phone app. So check out their website. So I think, Bernice, you're going to do this last quick slide. Or Brian.
Brian?
Yes, please don't forget to fill out your survey. It'll populate at the end in your browser, or we can share the link. Emily, can you share the link? And just fill out the survey. And if you have any questions, you can follow up with me or Bernice, and there's our emails on the screen.
Then we have one last slide.
Yes.
So
Which
again, oh,
No, go ahead, Bernice.
okay, just to close it out, again, on behalf of our USET and our partners, thank you all so much for sharing this space with us today for today's session. See you in March for our next session. It will be the impact of Western world view on Indigenous behavioral health with Dr. King. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Johnny.